My husband spent $25,000 of our savings on jewelry for his spoiled sister without telling me, when he lost his job and came begging me to save him. I said no, and filed for the divorce he'll never forget. I'm 30 years old. I'm a woman, and I just finalized my divorce like 3 weeks ago. I still can't believe everything ended like this. Honestly, because we'd been married for 5 years and I thought we were doing fine. You know, we had our problems like any couple, but nothing we couldn't work through. Or at least that's what I thought. But turns out my ex-husband, William, had other priorities in his life, and I definitely wasn't one of them. I guess I should start from the beginning, so this makes sense, because what happened was so absurd that sometimes even I can't process it. William and I met in college. We got married when I was 25 and he was 28, and honestly, the first few years were good. He worked at a tech company, made good money, and I also worked, although I left my job like 6 months ago because the company was downsizing and, well, they let me go. The thing is, we decided I'd take some time to look for something better, something I actually liked. And in the meantime, we'd live off his salary and our savings if necessary. We had like $80,000 saved in a joint account, money we'd been saving for years to eventually buy a bigger house or for emergencies, responsible adult stuff. The problem, and now I see it so clearly looking back, was Jessica. Jessica is William's younger sister. She's 27, and she's basically the spoiled princess of the family. I'm not exaggerating when I say this. Literally, she's the princess who never hears the word no. Since I met her, I always thought she was a bit bratty. Like if she wanted something, her parents would buy it without thinking twice. And William was the same with her. Every birthday, every Christmas, every special occasion, William would buy her super expensive gifts. I'm talking designer bags, brand name shoes, jewelry, things that cost thousands of dollars. At first I didn't say anything because, well, she's his sister and he earned his money. But it seemed excessive to me, especially because he never gave to me things that expensive. And when I'd mention something, he'd tell me not to be materialistic. That love isn't measured with gifts. Ironic, right? So we get to March of this year. Jessica was turning 27, and obviously she threw a big party at William's parents' house. I didn't want to go, honestly, because these family gatherings were always the same thing, everyone praising Jessica and treating her like she was the eighth wonder of the world. But William insisted. We went, and everything was going normal until it was time for presents. William pulled out a blue Tiffany box, one of the big ones, and when Jessica opened it, she almost fainted from excitement. It was a jewelry set, like necklace, earrings, and bracelet, all with diamonds and white gold. People at the party were like, wow, and William's mom started crying with emotion, saying her son was the best brother in the world. I sat there smiling like an idiot, but inside I was in total shock. Because that type of gift doesn't cost $500 or $1,000, we're talking about way more money. I waited until we got home to ask him, trying to stay calm. Hey William, how much did that gift cost? And he told me not to worry. That he'd paid for it with his credit card and would pay it off with his work bonus. I said, okay, but give me a ballpark number. And he got super defensive, saying why was I interrogating him? That she was his sister and he had the right to spoil her. 2 days passed and I couldn't sleep thinking about it. Something didn't add up. So, I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but that in the end saved me from more problems. I checked our bank account statement. And there it was, in black and white, a withdrawal of $25,000. $25,000. From our savings account. The withdrawal was from 2 days before Jessica's party. I sat there staring at the computer screen, unable to breathe properly because it couldn't be real. You know what I mean? That money was both of ours. It was for our future, for the house we wanted to buy, and William had taken it out without telling me absolutely anything. But wait, it gets worse. When I checked the account settings, I discovered that William had disabled the bank alerts that came to my email and phone. He literally hid this from me in a premeditated way. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment thing. It was something he planned, so I wouldn't find out. When I confronted him that night with the bank papers in my hand, first he tried to deny everything, saying it must be a bank error. But when I told him I'd seen the withdrawal receipt with his signature, he changed strategies. He told me, and I quote, exactly, because I'll never forget these words, that I was a stupid and irrational housewife who didn't understand anything about money or family responsibilities. He said Jessica was his sister, his blood family, and that he could do whatever he wanted with his money. I screamed at him that it wasn't his money, that it was our money, the money we'd saved together for years, and that I had also contributed to that account when I was working. He told me that if it bothered me so much, then I should get a job instead of being at home all day doing nothing productive. That hurt more than everything else. Honestly, I wasn't all day doing nothing. I was looking for work, sending resumes, going to interviews, and plus I took care of the whole house, the food, the cleaning, everything while he'd come home from work and throw himself on the couch to watch TV. And now it turned out that according to him, I was useless and didn't contribute anything. I started crying. I couldn't help it. And he didn't even try to apologize. He just said I was exaggerating, that the money could be recovered, that at his work they were about to give him a big project with a $30,000 advance, and with that we'd replenish the savings. The next day, I packed some things and went to my parents' house. I told them everything, and they were just as shocked as me. My mom wanted to go yell at William, but my dad calmed her down and told me to take things easy, to think carefully about what I wanted to do. William called me like 20 times that day, but I didn't answer. Finally, he sent me a message saying I was being dramatic and to come home so we could talk like adults. I responded that I wasn't coming back until he gave me a real apology and explained how we were going to get that money back. A week passed and William didn't apologize. Instead, he kept sending me messages saying I was the one ruining the marriage with my attitude, that his family thought I was being dramatic, as if I cared what his family thought, and that Jessica deserved that gift because she'd been working very hard. Working hard. Literally, Jessica worked part-time at her friend's boutique. It wasn't like she was saving lives or anything. Then something happened that I didn't expect. Like 2 weeks after I'd left the house, William called me super desperate. The company he worked for had lost that big project he'd been talking so much about, the project that supposedly was going to give him the $30,000 advance. But turns out he'd already received $25,000 as an advance that he now had to return because the project got canceled. He told me he needed the money urgently, or he could lose his job or even face legal consequences. I asked him why didn't he ask Jessica to return the jewelry? There he went quiet for a moment and then told me he'd already tried, but Jessica had flatly refused. He said the gift was hers, that she wasn't to blame, that William had made a mistake at work, and that besides she'd already posted photos on Instagram with the jewelry and all her friends had seen them, so it would be super embarrassing to have to return them. Can you believe it? Her brother's company was at risk, but she was more worried about her social media image. I told William to talk to his parents, that surely they had money saved and could lend him some. He told me he'd already done that, but his mom had sided with Jessica, saying how could he ask her to return such a beautiful and meaningful gift, that he should find another way to get the money. His dad at least was more reasonable and told him he was sorry, but they couldn't help him financially at that moment because they were paying off a big debt from I don't know what thing. So basically, William was on his own in this. Then he asked me, and to this day I don't know if he had the nerve or the stupidity to think it, if I could withdraw another $25,000 from the savings account so he could pay what he owed. I told him he was completely crazy if he thought I was going to take out more money after what he'd done. He begged me. Literally, he was crying on the phone, saying it was an emergency, that we could recover the money eventually, that please don't leave him ruined. I told him no, that he alone had gotten himself into this problem, and he alone had to get out of it. It was at that moment, while I was listening to him cry and beg, that I realized something. I didn't want to be married to this person. It wasn't just the money. It was everything. It was the fact that he'd lied to me. He'd hidden things from me. He'd insulted me. He'd prioritized his spoiled sister over our future together. And now, he came to ask me to save him after treating me like trash. What kind of marriage was that? What kind of future could we have if the foundation of everything was rotten? The next day, I called a divorce attorney that a friend had recommended. I went to a consultation and explained the whole situation. He told me I had a solid case, that we could proceed with the divorce, and that since the money in the savings account was marital, I had a right to my part, plus compensation for the unauthorized withdrawal. I told him to proceed with everything. William kept calling me for several more days. At some point, he told me he'd found a way to pay what he owed, that he was going to use personal savings he had in another account, an account I didn't even know existed, by the way, and that please reconsider the divorce thing. I asked him why hadn't he used that account from the beginning instead of taking money from our joint savings. He didn't know what to answer. The truth was obvious. He'd wanted to use the money from both of us because he wanted his personal money intact for himself. That finished confirming that I was doing the right thing. I blocked him on my phone after that because I couldn't stand his messages anymore. My lawyer sent him all the necessary documentation, and 2 weeks later, William was officially notified of the divorce. He showed up at my parents' house with all my stuff in boxes, knocked on the door like crazy until my dad came out, and left everything there on the porch without saying a word. Well, almost without saying a word. Because before leaving, he told my dad that I was making the biggest mistake of my life and that I was going to regret it. After that, he tried a new tactic. He sent me a long email, because he couldn't call me or send me messages anymore, saying he understood I was angry but that we shouldn't throw away 5 years of marriage, that we could go to couples therapy, that he was going to change, all the typical things someone says when they realize they really lost everything. I responded with a short email saying there was nothing to talk about, that please communicate only through the lawyers, and that he should respect my decision. The divorce process took like 2 months of mediation. William tried to fight to keep a bigger percentage of the savings, arguing that he'd contributed more in recent months. But my lawyer presented evidence of all my years of work and contribution, plus the fact that he'd made an unauthorized withdrawal. In the end, we reached an agreement where I kept 60% of what was left in the account, which after all the legal fees and his personal expenses ended up being like $30,000. It wasn't what we'd originally saved, but at least it was something. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. Like I told you at the beginning. The day we signed the final papers, William waited for me outside the courthouse. I tried to walk past, but he stopped me and gave me a letter. He told me to read it when I was ready. That he honestly understood he'd hurt me and respected my decision, but that he hoped someday we could at least be friends. I didn't respond anything to him. I took the letter and left. I read the letter that night. It was basically a long apology where he admitted he'd been an idiot, that he'd let himself get carried away by his family's pressure to always please Jessica, that he didn't value what we had until he lost it, and that if someday I wanted to give him another chance, he'd be there waiting. It ended saying he'd never stop loving me and that what we had was real despite how it all ended. Honestly, the letter made me cry. Not because I wanted to get back with him, but because it was sad to see how something that was once beautiful had turned into this disaster. I haven't responded to the letter and I don't plan to. A week ago, I used part of the divorce money to start my own small graphic design business from home, something I always wanted to do but never had the courage. I'm living with my parents for now while I save for my own apartment, and honestly, I feel calmer than I have in a long time. I don't have to deal with William's family drama anymore, or with their expectations that I be the perfect wife while he did whatever he wanted. Do I regret the divorce? No, not at all. Sometimes I wonder if things would have been different if William had truly apologized from the beginning, if he'd acknowledged his mistake and worked to rebuild trust, but I guess we'll never know. What I do know is that I can't be with someone who lies to me, hides important things from me, insults me when I'm vulnerable, and then expects me to rescue him from his own bad decisions. That's not love. That's not respect. And it's definitely not the foundation for a marriage. Jessica, by the way, still has the jewelry. I found out through a cousin of William's that she wears it all the time, and even made a post on Instagram thanking her brother for being so generous. She didn't mention anything about the divorce, of course, because for people like her, the consequences of their actions never arrive. But it's not my problem anymore. She and William can continue with their toxic dynamic of brother who sacrifices himself for spoiled sister. I don't have to see anything of that anymore. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd stayed, if I'd accepted his apologies, and we'd tried to fix things. We probably would have lasted a while longer, maybe a few years, but eventually something similar would have happened. Because the problem wasn't just the money or Jessica. The problem was that William and I had completely different values about what it means to be partners, about loyalty, about honesty, and that doesn't get fixed with therapy or empty promises. So, yeah, here I am, at 30 years old, divorced, living with my parents, starting over. It's not the fairy tale ending I imagined when I got married at 25, but it's not the end of the world either. It's simply a new chapter, one where I make my own decisions and where no one is going to make me feel less than for standing up for myself. And that, honestly, is worth more than any unhappy marriage or the $25,000 that William spent on his sister.